One evening, Henry was pushed into the works by a diesel to get his reverser mended. He looked around the shed at all the men and machinery. He was starting to grow anxious when a clang rang out. Henry looked in the far corner of the large shed where a huge, dented boiler stood. A worker had smacked his wrench on it in obvious anger. "That does it! I've had it with this old thing. Never could keep the shed warm enough. We need a new steam boiler." "Not one of you, is it?" Henry jumped and looked down. Beside him was a small brown engine. The engine looked up at Henry. "Hello, youngster. I'm Duke." Henry chuckled. "Don't sneak up on me like that." Duke laughed back. "I don't even have my tender, so I'm not going anywhere." Henry was surprised. "I've never seen a small engine with a tender before. That must mean you're very important." "Well," Duke smiled, "I was named after the Duke of Sodor." Henry was impressed. The worker clanged his wrench again and started swearing up a storm. Henry winced and longed to leave. "Don't like being in the works, eh, youngster?" Henry sighed and looked at the old brown engine next to him. "You'd feel the same if you were stuck in a shed for a year being rebuilt." Duke chuckled. "You're right. I've only been shut up for 22 years after my railway closed." Henry gaped. "Yes, youngster, they said I was too old to be useful, but here I am, being mended so I can be really useful again." Henry was speechless as Duke continued. "My friends have been keeping me occupied with stories they heard about you big engines. Must say I wouldn't have thought a big engine like you was afraid of water." "Huh," Henry grunted. "I was young and stupid. Thankfully, I'm a different engine now." Duke eyed him up and down. "That's good to hear. The workers are abuzz with your recent deeds. Your actions hauling 2 broken diesels would suit his grace splendidly." Henry forgot to be offended and beamed proudly. "Being broken," continued Duke, "is no fun for any engine. Our line had to close down because an engine broke down." "That's awful," said Henry. "By the way, what did you mean by that boiler being one of us?" Duke looked down. "That engine that broke down was a steam locomotive that our manager turned into a pumping engine after he was too reckless too many times." Duke looked up at Henry. Henry grew solemn. "Peter Sam and Sir Handel told us some about your old line." Duke smiled. "I'm so glad to see Peter Sam and Sir Handel again. It's like the mid-Sodor all over again." Duke paused, then frowned. "Well, almost. That engine that broke down is thankfully not here." Henry was curious. "If that engine was so important, why didn't your manager fix them?" Duke scoffed. "I bet Stanley took delight in seeing the line close. Didn't matter much, we didn't have the money to fix him. And thankfully," Duke winced, "none of us were compatible." Henry agreed, then realized what Duke had said. "What do you mean, compatible?" Duke blanched a bit. "It's just a story that Sir Handel told me recently. He said an engine named Culdee from another railway on Sodor told him a story that one of their engines fell down a mountain and couldn't be mended due to lack of budget." Henry gazed at Duke quizzically. "But," said Duke, "it's what happened after that's disturbing." "Well, go on," said Henry. "I do love a good scary story. Edward tells them all the time." Duke took a moment to collect his thoughts. "The manager used parts from the broken engine to mend his others. Said they were compatible because they were all mostly the same design." Henry was shocked. "As time went on," Duke continued, "the engine got smaller and smaller till nothing was left." He gazed up at Henry. "Thankfully, all us mid-Sodor engines are different designs, or Stanley would have had my boiler right now." Henry was pale. "But Sir Handel said that the engine added a bit more to the story. Culdee said that one of their faceless engines broke down soon after. They went and got what they needed from the broken engine. Unfortunately, these were some of his last parts, and taking them from him, well, killed him." Henry was horror-struck. He heard of engines dying of scrapping on the mainland, but to hear it happened on Sodor was terrifying. Then, Duke said, clearing his throat, when they put the parts on the faceless engine, it woke up. There was silence in the work shed after that. You could hear a pin drop. "But," said Henry, "but you said it was faceless." "It was," Duke agreed. "It woke, just the same, as soon as the scrapped engine's parts were put on. They tried taking the parts back, but the engine was still alive. They even put the parts back on the scrap engine, but nothing happened." The silence after Duke finished stretched on for what seemed like hours. "Duke," said Henry, "what do you think happened?" Duke sighed. "Henry, I don't know. I've been around a long time. But I still see new things all the time. Like those steamless engines running around." "You mean diesels?" said Henry. "Yes," agreed Duke. "Anyway, it was just a scary story that scamp Sir Handel told me. Don't think too much about it, Henry." Henry was about to reply when the boiler worker walked up to Duke. "Hey, Duke," the manager said, "some parts for you are coming in. We should be able to get you running again soon, though a full overhaul might be some years away." Duke sighed. "Oh well," he said. "I'll take what I can get. I'm almost 100 years old after all." The worker nodded and started to turn away. "Having trouble with that boiler?" Duke asked. "I would think you all would have more than enough experience to fix a simple boiler." The worker turned back, grimacing. "It's an old clunker that's been here for years. No idea where we got it. The thing's never fired properly, but we don't need it at full pressure, so it hasn't been an issue. Just stopped making steam today. No idea why." He then turned and walked back to the boiler, leaving the two engines alone again. "Duke," Henry said, his gaze following the workman, "in your story, how much of the engine was used to make a new engine?" Duke glanced up at Henry. "No idea, youngster. I assume not much, since other parts were taken off to mend Culdy and his friends. Why?" Henry kept staring at the corner. "No reason. Thanks for talking to me, Duke. I think I'll rest a while." Then Henry closed his eyes, and Duke did the same not long after. Later on, as the works was being shut down for the night, Henry peeked out at the empty workshop floor just before the lights went out. The old dented boiler sat in the corner, looking just as old and battered as ever. He gazed along the dented metal to the end of the boiler, where a firebox would be on an engine. The small firebox. Then shut his eyes tight as darkness fell over him.